In this video, I want to cover the additional support that we've added for the automated testing framework in our ESS portal, and this started with version 4.4. So let me first show some of the properties and settings here. So if you go to the portal settings area, you'll see under Other, at the bottom, there's a couple sections here related to what user account to use in impersonating these automated testing framework tests. I'll show you where that gets incorporated. There are also some of the tests that interact with our REST web services of our portal, mostly to test those REST web services to make sure they work correctly. And in order to do those, we do need to pass them credentials in order to run the inbound REST transaction. So there's two separate places where you can define these credentials: the login to impersonate, but also this basic authentication user credentials to use in testing inbound REST web services. So when you first install our app, this is going to have basically a blank password and a user account defined here. You'll want to adjust this to match a valid account within your system. Then you also see under the Other, there's a run portal test. I'll get to that in a second, but I also highlight too that under different sections here, so if you go to search, for example, you'll see a test at the bottom like run test search. So this is going to kind of target one of those automated testing framework tests. So for example, I can say let's go run this test. At this point, it's going to go impersonate that employee account, go run a search, come back with a result, whether it passed or failed. Now, just to highlight quickly what's going on with this, so as mentioned, there is the first step within these tests is to go and query that user account that we have defined in our properties for which user to use to authenticate or to impersonate to run these tests. This is where we're logging in essence, querying the employee record. And then the next one you'll see is kind of impersonate the user that we retrieved from that first test. And then in this particular case, we're running a run a search, kind of using a server-side script to run this search. And I just want to highlight a couple things that are happening in here. One is it's going to kind of run a search for a keyword of email, and then it's going to kind of track how long it took to run that particular search. Actually, so in this case, email access as the query that is being run. And if it returned no results, you'll see it kind of sets that return a false. If it took longer than 2 seconds, then you're going to see it returns kind of a false here, that it failed with either no results or that failed in this case because it took too long, took longer than 2 seconds to run. And then we're also doing some tests here of can we navigate to the next set of records? Is there another page that we can get to? If there is more than one kind of page being displayed, and if we can't navigate to the next page, we're going to return that as an error. Otherwise, it's ultimately a successful test, returning the number of records that were retrieved. All right, so that's that. You'll also see under the status, there's another run test for active ticket list. Very similar activity here, though this one does also have this kind of attempt to post inbound an update to an existing ticket that's in the status list. So make a commentary update to an existing record and assert whether or not that came back successfully. All right, so if we run this test, you'll kind of see the same sort of activities where it is going out and impersonating the user, checking how long it takes to get those particular list of records in their queue, right, whether that was successful in terms of returning records, in this case 8 active tickets pulled back in half a second, and then an attempt to make an update to one of those records through the REST web service, and that was then also successful. The wider list of tests, so if we go under Run Portal Tests, this is going to show you the full suite. And this, you can obviously say I want to run test suite, though I do recommend kind of testing some of these individual activities independently first, and then using the full regression, or use this as kind of a full regression test of various kind of functions. But some of the things you're going to see here, so there is some common functions used in our portal to get data for the header. So there's a test related to that. Some of the cart activities, adding, moving, removing items, saving items for later, those are kind of contained in the cart activities. I'll show catalog interaction in a minute. We talked about run a search, get an active list of tickets. There are also tests related to getting favorites, removing favorites, adding favorites, marking a record as a recent view, just making that show up in the recent activities and testing the performance of that. Same for things like suggestions, the announcements and events, testing whether those render in a meaningful or reasonable period of time. whether or not decision data for the Get Help page has any data. One thing to highlight with this one is our application on new installs is shipping without any decision data, so this one will probably fail an initial one, so I'll have to want to create a couple decision records and make sure they're showing up through this test. And then some of these other ones getting things like the dashboard data for the service health, getting the catalog data for the request page, getting the knowledge data for the knowledge page. All right, so let's look at the catalog interaction. This is one that's a little different in that this is making use of some of the new feature functionality added with London release and being able to run ATF against the service portal catalog items and forms. So you'll see some tests here too, and do kind of the same sort of things we did for some of the other tests, impersonate a user, but now you'll see open catalog item, set the quantity, set the variable values, validate the price, add it to the add to your current cart, open other catalog items, submit that item individually, and also open record producers, set variables, and submit the record producers. The one thing I want to highlight with this is that this test is kind of using out-of-the-box catalog items like Apple iPhone 6, kind of assuming certain variables exist, assuming certain prices are going to be set there. So this may fail in your environment based off of some of those assumptions, that maybe the items themselves aren't activated or don't exist or have different variables or might have different prices associated to them. So you may need to adjust the specifics of which items you're looking to add to cart and interact with through this test. But let's run this test and I'll show you kind of how this one operates. So this one's a little different because it basically has what's called a test runner. So you'll have to define how do I want to run this test. In this case, I'm just going to say go ahead and run this test. So it's basically going to pop open a separate window, which is where it's going to use this as kind of a frame to run the tests. This is helpful because you can kind of watch as it goes what it's doing. But you'll also see if you toggle back to your original kind of screen that it's going through the steps and highlighting your progress. So you can kind of toggle between the two. One, you can kind of see how it's interacting. The other one, you can kind of see where it is within the progress. All right, now this one's complete, all successful. Ordered the items, passed all these various tests, added things to the cart. All right, all very successful. The other thing I'll highlight with this too, you'll see any of these ones where it's interacting with the form, it will take screenshots of these as well, right? So you can kind of look at where was it at within these different steps and see the different screenshots of those activities, which is helpful. One last thing I want to hit on with this is just to highlight that particular test and some of the dependencies that are some of the things that were done with our new release to support that. So if you're updating the ESS portal application to version 4.4 and you've adjusted this catalog item widget, you may need to make some merging of code. But specifically, let me pull this up in the widget editor and I'll highlight, you'll see some bits and pieces within this client script that are ATF specific. So you'll see some options in here. You'll see ATF support, right? So there's an initializing of this scope ATF, exposing all of these functions right here are in essence for ATF to be able to do things like submit, add to cart, set quantity, interact, get prices. So you'll notice all of this code here is kind of specific to ATF. So if you've, in essence, you're probably going to want to leverage this new widget for the features of London and the features of ATF. But if you're having to have configurations you made previously to this widget, I'd recommend kind of trying to merge those in with these client script updates to make ATF work as well as your current configurations. So hope that was helpful in being able to see our new support for the automated testing framework, some of the tests that we've pre-configured for our portal, as well as where you need to make some maybe adjustments to make them work. Hope this is helpful. Thank you.